Muddy tire tracks and broken branches mark the scene Sunday of a deadly crash in upstate New York.
My guys jumped off the truck. They grabbed the jaws. I fired the jaws up. And they went down there. Within 2 minutes, they had that car open. We were pulling bodies out. They were still alive. And we kept going. Trained and trained and trained, and this is not what we're trained to deal with, is the aftermath. The things we saw was like a nightmare.
What if a single day, a single celebration, could turn into a nightmare? They were sisters, brothers, newlyweds, friends, all celebrating a birthday, each one full of life, full of hope. As laughter and conversation rang out inside the white stretch limousine, not a person inside had any clue that they were on a collision course with tragedy. A tragedy that would go down as one of the most deadly transportation disasters in U.S. history. This is the story of the Schoharie Limousine crash. It's a story of unimaginable loss, of a shattered community, and a tireless fight for accountability. It's a story that reveals the dangers of a broken system and asks a difficult question. How could this have happened? And what are we doing to make sure it never happens again? Axel Steenberg and his wife Amy both lived in Amsterdam, New York. Amsterdam is a city situated in Montgomery County, located on both sides of the Mohawk River and the Erie Canal. Its name originates from the famous city within the Netherlands. It's approximately 30 miles northwest of Albany and 60 miles east of Utica, and has a population of around 18,000 residents. It was 2018, and Amy Steenberg's 30th birthday was fast approaching. The pair talked things over, and Axel wanted to do something fun and exciting for his wife's big day. Axel would soon begin making plans with family and close friends to travel to the Ommegang Brewery. Ommegang is a well-known brewery located in Cooperstown, New York. The brewery specializes in Belgian-style ales. It was founded in 1997, and it became very well known for its creative beers that draw inspiration from Belgian brewing traditions. Axel continued calling and texting friends and family, and it wouldn't take him long to put together a sizable group of people, all eager to make Amy's celebration a day they would never forget. Axel then arranged for a party bus to provide transport for the group. With all plans seemingly in place, all they had to do now was wait for the big day. That big day came on the morning of October 6, 2018. The group of friends and family all gathered at the Steenberg home in Amsterdam. In attendance were 3 of Amy's sisters, Abby, Mary, and Allison King, 2 newlywed couples, Amy the birthday girl and Axel Steenberg, and Aaron Vertucci and Shane McGowan, Richard Steenberg, Axel's brother, Matthew Coons and Savannah Berses, who are a couple that live together, Rob Dyson, the husband of Mary King and an Army veteran, Abigail and Adam Jackson, Rachel Cavosi, a dental hygienist, Patrick Cushing and his girlfriend Amanda Halsey, Michael Ukaj, a Marine Corps veteran, and lastly, Amanda Ravenberg. As the group piled into the Steenberg household, Axel had to break some news to everyone. He had learned earlier that morning that the bus they had booked had broken down and was no longer available. But all was not lost, as Prestige Limousine Services, based in Gansevoort, New York, had arranged for new transportation. Prestige would send a stretch limo, a 2001 Ford Excursion, which had an 18-person capacity to fit the entire group. At this point, the group were just happy that their plans weren't thrown into complete and utter turmoil. At around 1 p.m. that afternoon, the limo pulled up in front of the house, and the happy group of friends and family piled in. The driver then began his trek towards Cooperstown. They were running behind, but the group wasn't about to let a delay derail their plans for an eventful day. As the Ford Excursion left the city, it went west on the New York State Thruway, and then south on New York State Route 30A. For those that don't know the area, New York 30A is a long, winding, tow-lane rural road. Why this route was chosen is still unknown, but investigators would later speculate that stops were planned between Amsterdam and the brewery. Near Schoharie Creek, New York 30A joins New York State Route 7, which the driver then turned left to join. The driver continued on and soon made a right-hand turn from New York State Route 7 onto New York State Route 30 near Schoharie, New York. The limousine then began its 1.8-mile descent towards the T intersection with New York State Route 30A. This section of road has a speed limit of 55 miles per hour. Shortly after the limousine made the right-handed turn onto New York 30, witnesses reported seeing it move towards the right shoulder. It then turned its hazard lights on. After a moment, the limousine returned to the road and then continued its trip south on New York 30. There are several sets of signs warning that trucks are not permitted on this stretch of road. The signs advise that trucks use New York 7 instead. As the driver continued down the road, more and more signs would warn about the steep grade ahead. A sign located 850 feet or 260 meters from the upcoming intersection indicates the limit is reduced to 50 miles per hour or 80 kilometers per hour. As the limo came up on the T intersection, it approached the rear of a 2016 Jeep Patriot SUV, which was in the same lane ahead. This SUV was stopped at the stop sign for New York 30 at the T intersection with New York 30A. The occupants of the SUV reported hearing the limousine coming up on them. They later stated that it sounded like a jet engine as it approached them from behind at a high rate of speed. The limousine driver quickly steered left to avoid smashing into the back of the SUV. The excursion then proceeded to blow past the stop sign. It careened through the intersection without slowing down and crossed straight through the east and westbound travel lanes of New York 30A. The limousine then entered the driveway of the parking lot of the Apple Barrel Country Store restaurant. Unable to avoid it, the limo then struck a parked and unoccupied 2015 Toyota Highlander SUV that was parked in a grassy field just adjacent to the Apple Barrel driveway. The limo was traveling at an estimated speed of around 101 to 118 miles per hour or 162 to 189 kilometers per hour. This collision caused a chain reaction as the SUV was propelled straight into two male pedestrians who were standing within its path of destruction. This initial collision slowed the limo to around 80 miles per hour or 128 kilometers per hour. The limo then continued on for about 55 feet before it entered a ravine and then struck an embankment and several trees. When the limo finally came to a stop, it was left completely mangled and sitting within a stream bed at the bottom of the ravine. The first 911 call was placed at 1:55 p.m. Schoharie County Sheriffs, along with the Schoharie County Volunteer Fire Department and EMS, were dispatched to the scene. They arrived swiftly at 1:59 p.m. They quickly surveyed the scene, and at 2 p.m., the severity of the incident was upgraded to what is known as a Level D mass casualty incident. This swiftly invoked much-needed help from numerous other agencies within the region. EMS quickly got to work on the limo passengers as well as the two men who had been struck by the SUV. Remarkably, 2 passengers within the stretch limo were found to still be alive. They were both immediately transported to the nearby Cobleskill Regional Hospital. One of those 2 occupants was pronounced dead on arrival at the hospital. The other was urgently taken by medical helicopter to the closest advanced trauma location at Albany Medical Center. Albany Med is the only Level 1 adult and pediatric trauma center in northeastern New York. Doctors at Albany Med swiftly got to work, and they did all they could, but the injuries were too extensive. The patient passed away later that day. When all was said and done, 20 people lost their lives. All 17 passengers of the limo, including 4 sisters, brothers, significant others, and more, were lost. The 2 men that were struck by the SUV, as well as the driver of the limo and 15 of the passengers, were all declared to have died at the crash site. This event would go down as the worst transportation disaster in Schoharie County history. The only tragedy prior that even comes close to rivaling it would be the 1987 Schoharie Creek Bridge collapse, which ended up with 10 people losing their lives. This tragedy was also the most deadly transportation-related accident within the United States since the 2009 plane crashed near Buffalo, New York, and killed 50 people. On October 6th of 2018, a horrifying tragedy occurred in the little village of Schoharie, New York. But why did this tragedy happen? And what caused so much devastation and loss for so many? Well, the investigation into the events were soon underway, and what was uncovered? Well, it's shocking, to say the least. As we dive into the investigation, let's first start things off with the driver, 53-year-old Scott Liznickia. From what's reported, Scott slept well the night before and woke at around 7 a.m. on October 6, 2018. At about 10 a.m., Scott left his home in Lake George, New York. He then drove to Saratoga Springs, New York to pick up the limousine. Prestige Limousine had 4 vehicles, but the only one capable of meeting the needs of the group was the 2001 Ford Excursion. At this point, Scott should have performed a pre-trip inspection of the vehicle, but it's unclear if this was ever completed. Scott then drove the limousine to Amsterdam and picked up the group. Now, Scott held a New York Class A commercial driver's license with double and triple trailer and tank endorsements. He had held a CDL since 1991, but Scott did not possess a transport endorsement. This endorsement is required to operate a vehicle that is meant to transport 15 or more passengers. Digging further into Scott's history, his New York driving record shows 2 traffic citations, one for operating an uninspected private vehicle in March of 2018 and another for operating an unregistered private vehicle in May of 2018. There was a license suspension for failing to pay the fine related to said March 2018 traffic citation, and an accident for failure to yield right-of-way while operating a private vehicle in November of 2015. His license was reinstated on September 7th of 2018 after he paid the fine that he owed. On August 25th of 2018, just 42 days prior to the accident, a roadside New York State police inspection was conducted on Scott while he was driving the 2001 Ford Excursion. The officer noted that Scott did not have a P endorsement to operate the vehicle, and notice was sent to Prestige Limo. That notice declared that Scott was to be taken out of service until he acquired the endorsement. As we know, Scott never acquired this endorsement, and Prestige continued to have Scott drive the limo around. According to Scott's wife, he was in relatively good health, and he only drank beer now and again. Diving further into this, it was found that Scott had recently had a right hip replacement in July of 2017. According to reports within the investigation, Scott was being treated for elevated cholesterol, gastric reflux, and ADHD. This may not sound like much of a problem, but Scott did not disclose any of this on his latest medical certification. Scott's most recent CDL exam was in September of 2018. In that exam, he indicated no medical conditions or health history issues. There was also the question of, have you used an illegal substance in the past 2 years? Scott answered no, but it was found during the autopsy and investigation that Scott was smoking marijuana. If he had divulged this information, he would have not been recertified. Now, there are red flags when it pertains to the driver of the limo, but in the grand scheme of things, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Scott was seemingly sober and capable of driving on that fateful day in 2018. He should not have been driving that limo, as he was not certified, but that is nothing when it comes to the criminal incompetence within other areas of this investigation. Let's now discuss the company that Scott worked for, Prestige Limousine Services. Firstly, Scott Liznickia had complained about the safety of the company's vehicles in the past. There had been times where Scott had refused to drive a specific vehicle altogether. The 2001 Ford Excursion SUV was manufactured in October of 2000 by Ford. In January of 2001, the vehicle alterer 21st Century Coachwork in Springfield, Missouri, purchased the vehicle. The New York-based Royale Limousine then selected and purchased the Ford SUV, and then had 21st Century Coachwork alter the vehicle into a stretch limo. Royale would own it until 2006, when it was sold to Advantage Transit Group. They owned and operated the vehicle until it was then sold to Prestige Limo in July of 2016. The alteration in 2001 involved cutting the SUV's factory frame and welding an additional 144 inches of frame rail to extend it. This modification increased the vehicle's wheelbase to 281.1 inches or 23.4 feet and its overall length to 370.7 inches or 30.9 feet. Once it had been altered to this design, the vehicle then met the definition of a bus. To put it all simply, the Ford Excursion's alterations created a heavier vehicle with an inadequate braking system, an unsafe seating and restraint system. Now, you can't necessarily blame Prestige Limousine for the alteration issues. They purchased the vehicle many years after and were most likely unaware of the issues the vehicle could have. But that doesn't mean Prestige Limo is innocent. In fact, their gross incompetence is a leading factor in why this tragedy occurred. First and foremost, the limo's owner, Shahid Hussain, who fled the country after the crash, and his son, an operator of the business, Nauman Hussain, were negligent in operating the stretch limousine despite knowing of its unsafe condition. The vehicle had failed multiple state inspections and was marked as out of service, but the order sticker was removed and the limousine was illegally put back on the road. The limousine's brakes were corroded and poorly maintained. Nauman Hussain was aware of the brake issues and failed to adequately address them. I don't know why they chose to ignore the red flags, but my guess is that it was a combination of laziness and financially not wanting to invest or spend the money. If they take the vehicle off the road, then they are unable to continue making easy money off of it, plain and simple. But there is more, as the stretched vehicle required a federal certificate to operate, which it lacked. In fact, Prestige Limousine had not received any authority to transport passengers in the state of New York at all. I will now read directly from a section of the National Transportation Safety Board's investigation. Prestige was operating without safety oversight and outside the New York State DOT bus inspection program. As an unauthorized carrier, Prestige and its vehicles bypassed the required semi-annual New York State DOT vehicle safety and motor carrier inspections, which must be conducted by a certified New York State DOT inspector. Prestige was also not subject to the compliance reviews that examine whether a motor carrier is adhering to the state requirements for safely transporting passengers and is meeting current safety fitness standards, such as having qualified drivers, maintaining drug and alcohol testing records, and conducting vehicle maintenance and inspection record keeping. Although a New York State DOT inspector eventually examined the crashed limousine and initiated an inspection that began the NOV process to bring Prestige under New York State DOT oversight, the process did not keep Prestige from continuing in business and transporting passengers before the October 6, 2018 crash occurred. This is all very damning to say the least, but there is even more at fault. Mavis Discount Tire, a national known chain, fraudulently gave the Ford Excursion a Department of Motor Vehicle DMV inspection sticker that it should not have received. Mavis did not follow New York State DMV policy-based instructions not to inspect a modified or stretch limousine. Stations like Mavis were to require the vehicle's owner to contact the New York State DOT to undergo a semi-annual bus safety inspection. But that's not all Mavis did wrong, as Prestige had brought the vehicle in not long before the accident for brake work. Mavis charged Prestige, but it appears the work was never actually performed. A former driver for Prestige Limo came out following the accident and claimed that the operators of Prestige performed only minimal maintenance work on their vehicles. After he left the company, he went and reported the vehicle to the state of New York, and that's where the final blame lies. The state of New York and the Department of Transportation failed every step of the way to enforce safety regulations, and they were ineffective in their oversight of Prestige Limo. New York State failed to impound the limousine even after it failed a DOT inspection, simply placing an out-of-service sticker on it, which was later removed. New York State didn't only fall short with Prestige limousines. In 2017, a federal audit was performed and found that New York State Department of Transportation verified repairs on only 1% of the vehicles it inspects, a staggeringly small amount. At the end of the day, so many different things ultimately led to what happened, and in a lot of ways, that 2001 Ford Excursion was like a ticking bomb, transporting passengers around, while at any moment it could have all gone wrong. To summarize a bit, the driver of the limo was not certified to be driving all those passengers on that fateful day. The driver also lied on his recertification, lies that allowed him to pass and continue driving. The limousine itself was modified improperly, and those modifications were a key factor in what happened. Prestige Limousine was found responsible for catastrophic brake failure due to the neglect of mandated commercial vehicle inspections and maintenance by company personnel. Not only did they not maintain their vehicles, they removed an out-of-service sticker from the stretch limo and employed a driver that they knowingly knew was not certified to be driving all those passengers around. Then you have Mavis, who did not follow proper procedure when it came to the inspection of the vehicle, and even more egregious, they were paid to perform brake work and simply did not do it. We know the brakes played a huge role in what happened, and I truly wonder if they had done the work, could this have been prevented? And lastly, New York State oversight of the company and vehicles failed every step of the way. This tragedy could have been prevented in so many ways, and it is simply baffling to see how much went wrong leading up to October 6th. Finally, Nauman Hussain was arrested shortly after the crash and ultimately indicted in April of 2019 on 20 counts each of second-degree manslaughter and criminally negligent homicide. In 2021, Hussain initially pleaded guilty to 20 counts of criminally negligent homicide with the expectation of a sentence of probation and community service. This plea agreement was extremely controversial. Criticism from the victims' families was loud and clear as they sought a much harsher sentence. In August of 2022, State Supreme Court Justice Peter Lynch would end up rejecting the initial plea deal. He was very vocal in calling it completely disingenuous and unacceptable. He also pointed to the removal of an out-of-service sticker from the limousine, stating that this was enough evidence to show that Hussain had knowingly broken the law. Justice Peter Lynch would proceed to give Hussain around 20 minutes to decide whether he wanted to withdraw his guilty plea and face a trial or accept a harsher sentence for his guilty plea. Hussain would end up withdrawing his plea, and the trial would begin in May of 2023. The jury would deliberate for 2 full days before finally coming to a decision. Hussain was found guilty on 20 counts of second-degree manslaughter. He was then sentenced to the maximum of 5 to 15 years in prison. Following the conviction, Hussain's lawyers would file an appeal. The appeal would not go as planned, as it was ruled that the evidence was sufficient for the jury to conclude that Hussain was aware of the limo's unsafe condition. Hussain's attorney plans to appeal once again, but as of right now, Nauman Hussain is serving his sentence in New York State's Attica prison. The last thing of note would be a report that Nauman Hussain is now battling stage 4 lung cancer. From what's been reported, he hopes to receive some leniency and be released early due to his diagnosis. It remains to be seen if that will happen. This story is tragic in every way. What was supposed to be a wonderful 30th birthday celebration turned into a nightmare for so many families involved, with the worst part being that this was 100% preventable. It's hard to say that there was anything positive to come out of this horrifying ordeal, but there were some positive changes made in the aftermath. Limousines that now fail their annual inspection are taken off the road. Loopholes in safety standards that allowed stretch limousines to operate without federal oversight for decades were finally closed. All new limousines are now required to have lap and shoulder belts at every seating position. Stretch limousines over 10 years old or with mileage exceeding 350,000 miles must be retired, and many more changes have been made to protect the public at large. In the end, this won't bring back the many lives that were lost, but it will hopefully prevent another tragedy like this from happening. In closing, I want to send my deepest condolences to all of the families, friends, the police, fire, EMS, and anyone else that was affected by the Schoharie Limo tragedy. A big thank you to each and every one of you for tuning in to another episode. If you enjoy the content that I make here on the channel, then please hit the like and subscribe button. YouTube seems to be suppressing things as of late, so a simple like and comment would go a long way in helping the algorithm push my video. Also, you can check the description box below and find the link to my merch store and a link to the membership tier for the channel. For only $2.99 a month, you can help support my channel further, and you get some cool perks to go with it. One of those perks is having your name listed here in the end of each of my videos. So thank you to all my Cellar Dweller members. Also, if you'd like to submit a story recommendation, please do so using the email that I have linked in the description box below. As always, I do all the research, writing, recording, and editing for the channel myself, so anything that you do to help support the channel is greatly appreciated. And until next time, I will see you all again as we head back into the cellar.